Hello, my name is Nick Grossman. I decided to do my Thinking Critically oral presentation assignment out of Chapter 5. I really enjoyed that chapter. I feel like I got a lot out of it. So I wanted to expand on that particular chapter on my oral presentation. Um, I decided to do the particular Thinking Critically case regarding the French banking um, company called Societe Generale, or SOGEN for short. The case begins by mentioning the 1995 Barings Briggs PLC incident. They were a um, bank who serviced the Queen of England, who had reports for losing almost um, 900 million pounds at the time. And they used that to transition into the more recent 2008 incident with, of course, Societe Generale, SOGEN for short, and their employee Jerome Carviel, and they uh, reported a loss of almost 5 billion euros, which translates to almost $7 billion in U.S. currency, um, and it kind of dives into some of the um, risk management problems that were going on in the company. It goes into some of the specifics of Jerome's um, um, wrongdoings, including um, falsified documents, and I will get into that later on in my presentation. The first question I chose to take a look at was who are the stakeholders, and in previous assignments, that particular question may yield two, three different stakeholders. However, I wanted to dive into this question because there are so many people, so many different entities that are affected by a €5 billion loss. 7 billion here in the states, translated to here in the states. Um, the book defines a stakeholder as someone with a share in a business enterprise. A share can be anything from a financial investment to just being affected by, for example, a construction site may affect the people around it. So the people around it are could be considered a stakeholder. Um, in this case, I wanted to start domestically, taking a look at the stakeholders domestically and coming out to a broader scale. Um, uh, First and foremost, I wanted to mention the bank itself as its own stakeholder. The other employees, including Jerome Carviel, his peers, his co-workers, are considered stakeholders because a financial blow of this size put a lot of these people out of work, and they had no knowledge of what was going on. They couldn't do anything to prevent this problem. The company, in fact, needed to take out an $8 billion rescue fund from private investors just to keep afloat. And through doing that, they needed to lower salaries. They needed to let employees go, um, and factor in legal fees. And I'll dive into that later in my presentation as well. Moving further out from the bank is the in fact country of France, because of their currency, which is in fact the euro. Because so much was lost from France, their country's currency was in fact devalued from this loss of currency, from this loss of euros, And because France shares their currency with the rest of Europe, um, that in turn affected the surrounding nations because, like I said, they all use the same currency. And because they all are trading nations with countries such as the United States, Canada, Mexico, Russia, China, Japan, um, you name it. Because they are all trading with these nations, um, this in turn makes these nations a stakeholder because of the devalue of the euro will also affect the world economy and devaluing the world economy as well. So the stakeholders in this case are much more than one glance over. When you dive into who the stakeholders really are, this affects almost every nation, any trading nation with France or Europe or any of the countries that use the euro. I wanted to dive into the second question. What did Jerome Carviel do wrong? And after that, I wanted to dive into what did Sojin do wrong? Because although Jerome Carviel worked for Sojin, they are in fact two separate entities. So it's interesting to look at who is in the wrong, and how they are in the wrong. I personally believe both entities are in the wrong, but I wanted to look at how and why. Jerome was found guilty in July of 2008 for falsifying documents, for using these falsified documents, and for also breaching IT control access codes. He was so convinced that he had found an algorithm that could predict future trades, success rate. He was almost overzealous and took this algorithm to an extreme. Um, he also, of course, damaged the economy of France, devalued the currency of the euro. I'm sorry, devalued the value of the euro, um, and he impacted the global economy. And I know, I'm sorry, that should have been taken into account when he was dealing with these massive amounts of money, because this massive amount of money, in fact, brings risks as well. And this algorithm that he based his multi-million-dollar trades was not tested. It wasn't a sure bet. And when dealing with these large financial amounts and these huge risks here, um, a little bit more sure, a little bit more guarantee would be necessary. Actually, I would say a lot more guarantee would be necessary when dealing with these millions and billions of dollars. Um, I also wanted to dive in on what the company itself, Sojin, did wrong, because it's interesting to see how they could have prevented this entire case and this entire loss of money from happening. The company actually withheld an investigation of Jerome because they did, in fact, notice some red flags come up um, regarding his trading, because Jerome Carviel was a mid to low level paid trader that is considered around 100,000 euros. Um, However, he was handling 50 million dollars worth of currency, and it had a $55 million return for the company. He made 55 million for the company, and investigators say this is actually one of the reasons the company withheld their investigation on him, which, in my opinion, I believe they would have found him guilty of illegal trading and some of these other charges a lot earlier before they would have found um, before they would have lost all of this money. It also sent their executives into a frenzy There were resignations being declined by the board. They were being kept there, even though they had put in a resignation. Um, so their credibility was being lowered. They tried to be bought out, but refused by a foreign bank, and the majority of the problems that were going on were internal, and it showed their extreme lack of risk management. Um, um, that's all I found from my research, and thank you for listening.